Welcome to By the Numbers. This is a show that was created several years ago. The idea was to give folks kind of an in-depth look at the financials or the numbers when it comes to a town budget. We've had many conversations. It's been a few years since we've actually utilized this particular program. But one of my guests said, you know, it might not be a bad idea that we pull it out of mothballs and utilize that show to share with folks the information in regards to the overrides that are happening in the two communities. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the town of Whitman, their budget situation, and the override request that's being put forth at town meeting and at the ballot on May 17th. Joining me for this conversation, we have Kathleen Ottina. She is the chairperson for the Whitman Finance Committee.
Thank you for inviting me tonight, Kevin.
You got it. And then we have Justin Evans. He is a member of the Whitman Select Board.
It's good to be back.
And he is the individual who said to me, it may not be a bad idea to pull this thing out of mothballs and use it to talk about the situation with the town's finances.
Yeah, I thought it was a good idea to bring this up. I know as we're considering an override, my biggest concern right now is that the citizens make an informed decision. So there's definitely two very different options on the table, whether to approve a Prop 2.5 override or to reject it. So I think that deserves as much attention as we can give them.
Is it worth looking back at, I mean, we're currently in fiscal year 25, but what was it like at this time of year 1 year ago where the town was dealing with financial issues? If I'm correct, and we were kind of talking before the cameras went live, that you gave the community at town meeting 3 different scenarios. Is that correct?
It is correct. There were 2 selectmen recommendations, selectmen with override, selectmen without override, and finance committee without override. And this time last year, the Finance Committee was still meeting to deliberate budgets, to deal with some of the last-minute changes that were taking place, and up to the point where we were meeting every Tuesday and Thursday. We finished our work on April 8th this year. We had plenty of time to go through the budgets, meet with the budget managers, meet with the capital committee chair, and meet with the select board on 3 separate occasions, Kevin, because we wanted to avoid the confusion last year, where there were, what was the selectmen's budget with an override? You know, what was at stake? So I began meeting with Mary Beth Carter and Sean Kane back in August and September to sort of lay down the ground rules. We didn't want to confuse the voters. It's a hard enough decision to make as it is. So what passed last year was the Finance Committee's recommendation, not an override. We did use free cash, $509,212, to close the budget deficit for Article 2, which is not a sound financial policy. We admitted it. It was a very poor financial decision, other than there was no other option. And the reason that the Finance Committee opposed the other options last year was that, first, it held the deficit responsible for one department. It held the schools responsible for the deficit. And having a schools-only override was not anything that we supported. But the second issue was the $500,000 override was not going to be sufficient to get us anywhere in the future. It was a one-shot. We'd get through last year, and then we'd be dealing with future overrides as we are this year. So I think we've had a much more productive discussions with the select board. There were 3 options that were available to us as a finance committee this year in terms of what we recommended. There was, you know, it's the amount of the override. And so it was called a 3-year override, and that was the amount of money that would have gotten us through fiscal 28. So enough to get through fiscal 26, plenty to get through fiscal 27, and enough to squeeze through fiscal 28. So we're not going back to the voters year after year. But my committee discussed at length the benefits of the 1 year, the more conservative $2 million override that was finally voted by the select board last week, and the more ambitious $3 $3.5 to $4 million override that would have taken us through 3 years. And the consensus was there's too much unknown. We know fiscal 26, we know what the revenue is, we have a pretty good handle on income, but we don't know. We can project 27 and 28 with some degree of certainty, but lots of things can change. So that's the big difference, I believe, between fiscal 25 and fiscal 26. We're much more united in terms of making our recommendations clear to the voters so that they're not confused by what are these options and what are the ramifications.
Would you like to follow up on that at all?
Just to echo that, yeah, this has been a much more collaborative approach this year. You know, the select board did designate Sean as our sort of budget coordinator to work with Mary Beth and Kathleen on the finance committee, projecting out what these different options were going to look like. We did that early on, and yeah, we've met 3 times.
Yes.
I think the select board, coming out of that meeting, the last joint meeting with the finance committee, had expected a 3-year recommendation to come back based on the feedback from department heads and just the kind of general tenor of that initial meeting. But they came back with we are certain about the deficit for the 1 year. Let's go for a 1 year. It's easier to explain. It's easier to justify the exact costs. And the select board unanimously agreed. So it was 2 unanimous votes to move forward with a plan to solve the issue for this year. And you know, we will work on future budget challenges going forward.
What seems to be the biggest driver of, or the tipping point as far as the finances for the town? Is it any one item, whether it's, you know, retirement, you know, the retirees and the retirement fund that the municipality has to pay into? Is it, you know, annually, I know each community, Whitman and Hanson, receive an assessment. And there's a lot of back and forth between the towns and the regional school district as to what the percentage will be. Is it anything like that? Is it a matter of the low number of financial, the local aid that the state has provided? Folks know that, you know, it's a $62 billion budget being put forth by the governor, but you know, there's only a small percentage that the towns are getting. And I'm not talking about local aid like Chapter 70 or Chapter 90, but it's other residual funds.
Yeah, and so it's really the pressures are on both the revenue and on the budget side, on the expense side. So on the revenue side, it is a lot of what you just said. State aid has been relatively flat. It's going up 1 or 2% a year, pretty consistently for the last couple of years, and that is on the municipal side. On the Chapter 70 side, the largest chunk of available state aid for most cities and towns. In a regional school district, it goes directly to the district. So Whitman is not seeing that aid, but it is paying for our students to go to Whitman-Hanson and South Shore Tech. But Whitman-Hanson has been in you call it the hold harmless situation now for over a decade, where because the state formula says that it takes less to educate, or that our students deserve less aid than they have in the past, or this district, because our student population is declining, the state is not reducing our aid, but holding it level to where it was last year, plus an additional minimum per pupil amount. So the aid to Whitman-Hanson from the state each year is only going up by $100,000, $200,000, and then that's offset with additional assessments to charter schools or other charges back from the state. So that really that leaves most of the revenue burden on the taxpayers, on property taxes, which has grown as a share of our revenue from about 60-65% up to 75+% of all of the town's funding now comes from property taxes. So that's the revenue picture. On the expense side of things, we've been hit with really increased pressures on the fixed costs. So yeah, as you said, healthcare is Plymouth County. Not Plymouth County, the Mayflower Municipal Health Group is one of the best managed plans in the state, if not the best managed plan. And its costs went up 7% this year. Now, if we were in the GIC, one of the more broadly available plans, it would be up 15%. The MIA, Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Agency or Association plan is also up about 15% this year. So of our options, we are in the best one. It's still growing a lot faster than Prop 2.5. On the retirement side, Our Plymouth County retirement assessment went up about 11% this year, which is consistent with the about 10% it went up last year. So that is really burdening us. We're up over $3.5 million in Plymouth County retirement assessments for just the municipal side. The schools have their own retirement bucket, and they've got over 600 employees, so it's a sizable part of their budget as well. So these fixed costs are growing much faster than property taxes are allowed to grow under Prop 2.5, which is when you get to this situation where you ask the taxpayers for a Prop 2.5 override.
So it's worth me asking, and you talk about revenue. I know that there was a time that the town voted to have a meals tax, right? That's something that is fixed. If you purchase anything, a meal at one of the local restaurants or eateries, that some of those come back. Does any of that help generate revenue? I know that there is marijuana that I don't think that there's. I think it's strictly medical marijuana, or is the town?
I think recreational.
And now there's recreational.
Yeah.
When will the town see money from that, and will that help alleviate some of the financial woes the town is dealing with? Kathleen?
Yeah, well, the meals tax definitely helps the revenue side. I'm checking my spreadsheet, and meals tax for fiscal 26 looks like we're estimating $250,000,
Okay.
and that
doesn't go far, though.
it helps. It reduces the request of the citizens to kick in even more from their taxes. One significant generator of local funds is the ambulance account, where the fire department is responsible for generating about $1.5 million in local receipts because of the increased calls, which is a credit to them, and it's reassuring to the citizens when they show up. So that's also used to generate some revenue for the town. Most of the rest of them are smaller amounts. So those are the two big ones, and the local receipts are pretty steady. One of the areas that isn't growing is new growth. Where in the past, I think there was a year recently where over $600,000 in new growth, new buildings, new taxable properties came on the books, and that was a boost to the levy limit. But this year we're predicting under $200,000. So it's a decrease in a revenue source, or a decrease in the ability to generate more revenue.
Is there any other ways to generate revenue? Because this seems as though this has been a systemic problem when it comes to the community trying to have enough revenue, and it seems like every year it's a scramble. And usually, sometimes there's an 11th hour saving option, whether it's free cash, as you mentioned, or something is discovered where, okay, we're okay. Your thoughts?
And so, marijuana was one you mentioned. Back in 2022, the town did vote to overturn its prohibition on recreational marijuana establishments. That was, the prohibition entered into in 2017. So it was short-lived, but when the state law took effect, we reacted and said, let's put a pause and see how we can maybe work with this. A couple years later, some of our neighbors opened up or allowed the license of marijuana establishments, and we followed suit. Our first establishment up on Route 18 just got its provisional license back in January from the Cannabis Control Commission. They put the sign up, I think, this week. So I'm expecting them to open any day now. I think we've ballparked $100,000 in revenue from that establishment. So that's already baked into the fiscal 26 numbers. We did estimate $100,000 last year because we thought they were going to open last year. It didn't happen. So that ended up, we made that up elsewhere in revenues, luckily. But so that's we did make that change. Last year, the select board did vote to increase demand fees, people who are late paying their bills, an additional charge, like a bank would charge. And we did, just a couple of weeks ago, increase fines for parking tickets. So we're looking at different revenue sources. The challenge with all of these are that it's all coming from our residents anyway. And so even, the meals tax is the people that live here paying the meals tax. It's, the ambulance fees are your health insurance if you call the ambulance. Yep. It's not coming from anywhere outside. Sure. So it's we're saving on the property taxes by charging you higher parking tickets.
So my concern here, and concerns might not be the right word either, the ambulance account has long been used as something to replace, because we know that public safety vehicles, police and fire, a lot of hard miles, right? So they tend to need to be turned around a lot faster. And the monies from that account would go towards paying that. What happens when an ambulance needs to be replaced? Or is it a matter of going for like a capital expense, a 1 year to be able to, is that what the town is thinking?
Well, so back in 2020, we brought a consultant in back in 2019, John Madden, former Duxbury finance director.
The Madden report.
The Madden
Yes.
report. One of his recommendations was to abolish the ambulance account and treat that as general fund revenue. And so in 2020, we did that at town meeting. So the $1.4 million that the ambulance funds are going to bring in this year is just going to pay toward the operating budget. So that does raise the capital challenge, right? So part of that vote back in 2020 by the select board and I guess the board of selectmen back then was to set aside about $150,000 a year toward an ambulance, and we'll put it in capital stabilization, and then after 3 years, buy a new ambulance. That's our turnover rate for ambulances. You want to run it as the primary for 3 years, the secondary for 3 years, and then keep it in the armory in case one breaks down for 3 years. And then you get rid of that and buy a new one. But COVID hit, we ended up purchasing 2 ambulances, one with CARES, one with ARPA funds. We've probably fallen off that practice. The capital account's been used for several other things during that time. And we are now looking at purchasing a new fire engine, a new pumper, and that costs about $1.5 million. So we do have challenges on the capital side to deal with by treating the ambulance fund as revenue, but it also brings those public safety capital requests in line with the DPW, in line with technology. It's now not a favored capital account. The capital committee will have to take these requests and prioritize them and say, yes, you need a new fire engine, but the HVAC in the police station is way beyond life, or the fire panel at the town hall needs to be replaced, and everything is on a level playing field for capital funds.
So at this particular time, the request is for $2 million or $2.2 million?
$2 million.
$2 million. How is that number arrived at? Now, and this is for level funded services?
Yes.
Okay.
It's for level funded services, and a grant was received by the town that has allowed for some pretty sophisticated financial forecasting, generating profiles of what can we expect in free cash, not so much free cash, but what can we expect in the revenue, in the funds, so that we can run simulations. And Mary Beth Carter and Kathy Keefe have worked tirelessly to generate information, come up with models, and so we were well into the budget process this year, Kevin, as I said, where we're not at the last minute, a week before town meeting, coming up with our final recommendations. So there's been time to run simulations. What if this happens? What if that happens? And it's still a work in progress, but right now, the deficit, with a $2 million override, there is no deficit for fiscal 26. If there were no, if it fails, then the deficit is about $1.8 million, $1.9 million. Where is that going to come from? But if the $2 million passes this year, we will be in fiscal 27. It's not going to get us through fiscal 27, but it's a $500,000 deficit without anything else changing, without anything getting better or getting worse. So it's a stopgap, if some people want to call it that. So with some people who really did want the 3-year override, or the so-called 3-year override that would have carried us through 3 fiscal years. But the Finance Committee really believed that you close the budget gap this year, it's most likely to pass. If you ask for too much or you get too sophisticated with your reasoning, many citizens will shut down. And the biggest reason that the committee came unanimously supporting the 1 year was that it's the uncertainty of the forecasting, as good as it is. We know what we're looking at in fiscal 26. Fiscal 27 and fiscal 28, the economic volatility that's out there today could cut either way. Things could get better, and then we would have asked for more money than we needed, which we wouldn't touch, so that would have been okay. But things could get worse, and the $3 million or $4 million that was being requested might not even get us through fiscal 27, and then we look like we have no idea what we're doing. And so we felt that the safest way to go was to go for the $2 million override that will get us through the fiscal 26 budget deficit, and just see what happens during the course of the next fiscal year.
So I would ask, what happens if this is not successful? Folks need to know what are the circumstances if, in fact, it does not pass.
And so there's really two parts to that question because of the regional school district aspect. So when we were working through the budget scenarios, we presented, we gave our projected share of the deficit to Whitman Hanson. The school committee maintains budget autonomy. They will set what the budget that they assess back to the towns of Whitman and Hanson is. But we said, if an override fails, this is what we expect you to have to cut. And so they gave us what that would do to their budget, to their staffing, and expected a reduction in 24 positions, 14 teachers, about 2 admins. They can shift hours around a little bit, make some part-time. But it ends up being about 2 full-time equivalent admins and 8 paraprofessionals across all the schools. This is Whitman and Hanson, but it's also the elementary, the middle, the high school. It's across the entire district.
Okay.
On the town side, our share of the cuts, we would be looking at about 6 public safety and public works employees. Within our unions, those are the employees that make the most money and they make up the biggest share of that. If you have to cut someone there versus someone in the library or town hall, it's a larger salary to reduce over in public safety and public works. And on the general government side, it would be the equivalent of about 8 positions, where some of those are part-time, some of those are departments that used to be part-time and could go back, have gone full-time, could go back to part-time. And so it's going to be a reduction in services and hours pretty much across the board, both in the school district and in general government.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
And if I could go back to the school discussion for just a little bit.
Please do.
If there were a lesson we learned from last year, it's that we, the town, cannot cut the school budget. Holding them hostage to an override is not a way to go. The town can vote the budget up, or they can vote it down, but they can't say, and we want you to cut this much money. So part of the collaboration this year also included representatives from the school department. Jeff Simonek has been at many, many meetings, contributing, understanding what the financial pressures are, collaborating with us. So we aren't telling him that you have to do this, but he's a very bright man. He realizes that he can't just take the money and run. He won't get a budget passed, number one. The budget will be defeated. And so he's been part of this process from day one. It's not the tension that has been, it's tense, but it's not the tension that has been in the past where it was us against the schools or somebody against the schools. So I think the vast majority of citizens now understand you either vote the school budget up or down, but you can't cut it. Same with the South Shore Regional VOTEC. We can say we're not going to pay this assessment, but we're not going to tell you how much you have to cut. So.
And I feel as though when I've had a conversation with anybody who is either an elected official, anybody who's working at town hall, anybody who has knowledge about the override, it's not a matter of, well, you need to pass this override because this is going to be affected. This is going to be, I feel as though we're not trying to play departments against each other. It's a matter of that there's going to have to be it's going to have to be even-handed when it comes to making those cuts, if in fact this happens, right?
True, absolutely true.
Yeah, the only way to not make it even-handed is some of the discussions we had early on, which is, are there any departments, entire departments that are not essential, and can we shut them down? Something like the library, which I think has
like furlough them for 26?
Completely, yeah. Sacrifice state grant. I'm not suggesting that now, but to sacrifice the state money we get for the library, lose their certification, but it would save us about $500,000 and make up about half of the cuts the town would have to make. While protecting public safety. It just is such a drastic move. I think there are 4 towns in Massachusetts that don't have libraries, and they're all rural Western Mass towns. So I don't think it's a good idea for Whitman to become the 5th.
Has either the select board or the finance committee looked at other communities? Hanover went through a similar situation where they did not pass an override. Hanson last year didn't pass a $362,000 override, and they had to reduce services at town hall. Even I think had a fall town meeting to try to see if they could stimulate a vote. Do you look at those situations and say, this is something we have to consider, and maybe try to relay that through the forums that I know that have been held? I know you're up to 2 so far, with a 3rd one coming.
Yeah.
have you relay that to folks as to this is what neighboring communities are going through. We're not alone.
And so we've discussed that a little bit in the forums. I think it probably could be broadcast a little louder. Duxbury recently had an override that failed. I know that Bridgewater Raynham, as a collective school, is also seeking an override.
Sure.
In both of the towns, Milton, Norwell, Hanson this year again. So and Hanover this year again. So it is really not just a regional thing, but a statewide thing. A lot of these pressures that we are feeling in our budget are affecting communities all over the state.
And one of the differences, I believe, though, Kevin and Justin, is that the Whitman override is for level services. Some of these overrides that have failed, Duxbury, for instance, they were looking to add personnel, to increase, I don't know if it was the fire department or the library, but they wanted to add more than the taxpayers were currently receiving. I believe there's also other overrides that have added, or would hope to have added services. We're not asking for added services. This is what it's going to take to maintain.
Duxbury attempted to do that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and they failed. So I think Sean has been incredible in terms of his leadership, saying, let's be conservative. Let's show the taxpayers that we are making a sacrifice too. We're not asking you to give us more money than we absolutely need, because people are concerned, well, if we give you more money, you're just going to spend it. Or the unions will say, oh, there's more money to be negotiated in our contracts. So it's a very fiscally tight fiscal 26 budget. And I hate the word transparent because it's used so loose and carelessly, but we've had meetings. The meetings are on WHCA. You can listen to us or watch us, and they're open to the public. So there's no additional services in the fiscal 26 budget, not in the town side and not in the school side.
And I think if you look at the override requests around the South Shore this year, I know Duxbury did ask for additional services. Norwell is as well, and Hanson is as well.
Yeah.
So I think Whitman still sort of stands alone as asking for the minimum that we need to maintain the level of services we're currently providing.
Is it safe to say that what needed to be trimmed has been trimmed and that there's not much left to cut?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes, absolutely. We deliberate. This was interesting because I have 4 rookie members of the Finance Committee, and because they don't have an ingrained method of approaching the budget, they had some really unique approaches and asked really good questions. So when we had the school budget to analyze and just question, not suggest cuts, we generated 33 questions for the superintendent that I sent him, and he emailed me back the responses. And with the budgets, we went Article 2 line by line and came up with 22 questions for Mary Beth Carter to come back and explain what's the sick leave incentive pay, or who inspects the elevator lift, and is it just the town hall? So really detailed questions that we received answers from, and we're confident that this is a budget that has been scrutinized.
I think it's. Did you want to follow?
I was just going to say, and I mean, the level of services we're providing now. I mean, we don't have custodial services provided every day in the senior center, and they serve food there, and serve a population that can generate a mess.
Right.
So I think it's, there are places where we certainly probably should be adding services, but we're taking the conscious approach that now is not the time to ask.
I have to ask this because knowing that you're out there, you're talking to folks, you've had forums. What are the common misconceptions that you're hearing from residents and voters about the override of the town's finances? Justin?
I think a lot of the misconceptions we're hearing now is, I'm blaming a lot of it on the schools. That has been not understanding that the 9.5% assessment that the schools are sending to the town is not a 9% budget increase for the regional school district. The school's budget itself is going up by 5.5%, which is high, driven by a lot of those fixed costs. But because the state aid has been so flat, that entire increase is being put on Whitman and Hanson. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception. I don't know if you've got anything else that and people saying we live on a fixed income, so you have to too. And it's like, it's not that easy. Yes, individual households can tighten their belts and make individual decisions, but we're talking about a community of 15,000 people, 11,000 voters. What one family might tighten their belt over, whether it's cable costs or buying Dunkin' Donuts coffee, another family might not even have that in their budget. We have to look at what can we do as a town to make
responsible recommendations and tell you what's at stake.
I just want to let folks know that to traditional WHCA shows, we normally go about a half an hour, 30 minutes. We're probably going to go maybe a minute or two longer here, just to make sure that we've vetted out all these different answers in regards to this override. Again, that's what we're trying to do here by the numbers. Where does the town stand in regards to a 5-year financial plan or a capital improvement plan to guide sustainable budgeting?
So on the 5-year financial plan, we did, as Kathleen mentioned, bring in we sought a grant to bring in the state and develop a better forecasting tool. So that's something that we have a pretty confident, obviously it's projections, but for the next couple of years, we knew roughly what the deficit was going to be in fiscal 27, 28, when we projected it out a couple more years. On the capital side, that's an area that we need to improve. Our last comprehensive 5-year capital plan was in 2019. That's now lapsed. So, and it included things like the Duval roof, which we never got around to, as some of our highest need capital items. And other things came in. The middle school, I don't even know, it may have been on there, but pretty low priority. The DPW building was on there, that got done. So that's definitely an area that we need to work on going forward.
And I think the change in the policy changes that the selectmen enacted actually speak to the need to be budgeting for the future. So the policy to take 10% of free cash and immediately put it into capital stabilization to build the capital stabilization fund speaks to the need to have a plan that can be funded. And the same, the 10% of the remainder of free cash will go into general stabilization. So it builds up the emergency funds for much needed capital improvements or projects that just have to be done. You don't want the sidewalks crumbling and the streets being in disrepair because all of your money is going to go to pay for your operating expenses. It's just not a wise thing to do.
And actually just having these policies in place should help improve our bond rating for borrowing projects, whether it's a large project like the middle school or short-term borrowing like a new fire engine. So we've been a AA3 rated municipality for a while, which is very good, but there's room to improve, and hopefully with this focus on budgeting, on planning, on good fiscal policies, we can improve that.
How would this override affect the average Whitman homeowner's property tax bill?
So a $2 million override assessed to the average single-family home of $495,736.78 is an approximate annual increase of $371. Breaks down to $31 a month. Now, if your home is valued at more than $495,000, it's higher. If you're lower, it's lower. But that's the average single-family home in town.
Now, knowing this is a $2 million, this is just a 1-year fix. Is there a possibility that we could see another request in fiscal 27? Because people will probably go in, well, all right, is this going to be like something that happens every year, Kathleen?
Well, to be honest, Kevin, that may well be the future of Proposition 2.5, that people have to get used to the idea that we will come up with the best, most fiscally sound budget we have, see what the revenues are. Hopefully we will be generating additional revenues, and then we don't need to ask for additional taxes from the individual taxpayers. But the reality is 2.5 is something that we have to live with, so if we don't generate enough income or enough revenue to support the budget that's been proposed, the answer is yes. Down the road there will be additional requests, and it shouldn't be seen as onerous. It's like we're being responsible. We're not asking you give us as much money as we think we're going to need for the next 5 years, and we'll never come back to you because you don't know what you're going to need.
And there is some good news coming down the road. So, the Whitman Middle School is currently about $15 million under budget. So that is money that we will hopefully not have to borrow. About 60% of that will be the town's share, 40% back to the state. But that is hopefully money we don't have to borrow, won't get assessed to property taxes. After fiscal 30, we expect the Plymouth County pension obligation to fall off. So one of the reasons that's been growing so quickly is that we're coming up on the deadline to fully fund our pensions from a Mitt Romney era state law. And so that alone opens up an additional $3.5 million a year within the operating budget. So, we're hoping to get to that point. It's really the question of between fiscal 27 and fiscal 30 that is still going to be open if this override passes. And can we bridge that gap with, maybe some new growth from the MBTA communities law, as Whitman's a compliant town within MBTA communities, or maybe some of these additional projects either generate new growth or new revenue from things like recreational marijuana. But there is that couple-year gap where I am a little nervous that this may be a request going forward.
Did you want to follow up?
No,
on that?
that's, just be honest with the voters. I think that the message that we've been delivering at the forums are, this is what it's going to take to bridge the budget gap. This is what it's going to cost to fund your services that you've come to expect that you don't want cuts in. But if you choose not to, and was the message at the Council on Aging yesterday was, you have to vote what's right for you. So there's not a hard sell. There was no scare tactics. This budget is actually pretty conservative. As Justin said, we could have, or they could have chosen to go, we're going to close this and reduce that and lay off a lot more people than to scare people. That's not the goal here. It's to just say this is what it costs to live in Whitman in 2025, 2026, and do you want to maintain your services or not?
Well, I think it's fantastic that we have two individuals here who are differing demographics, right?
Yes, you could say that.
You can say that.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to say it in the kindest way.
Yeah,
Different demographics where folks may not know it, but you pay taxes in this town. You pay taxes in this town, and you are supporting this endeavor. What's your message to residents who may be undecided or skeptical about supporting this override? Additionally, what could you impress upon them in regards to making sure that they turn out at town meeting and go to the ballot on the 17th if this is in fact something they feel strongly about?
So, I mean, I think the message that the Select Board has been trying to put out pretty consistently is that this is a choice for the voters. If we are presenting, because we're only putting one contingent budget forward, this is the one that is recommended by the boards to fund services with an override, and the override will be a vote after town meeting. Town meeting May 5th, ballot vote May 17th. But really, we want to impress that this is a decision. If you want to continue having the services that are being provided to you, it's going to cost an additional about $371 per household. If that is a bridge too far for you, the reduction in services is going to be reduced hours, reduced services, potential reductions in force at police, fire, DPW, across town hall, within the school district. So I really want to impress that this should be an informed decision. I don't want to hear from anyone after the vote, whether it passes or fails, oh, I didn't know it was going to increase class sizes to whatever if it failed. Or, oh, I didn't know it was going to cost me this much now that it passed. I just didn't want to, lay off firefighters. So really it's pay attention to what's going on, get out and vote at town meeting. And vote at the ballot May 17th.
Do not let ignorance rule your decision.
Right.
Yep.
Kathleen, anything you want to follow up with?
I cannot improve on that. It's the message that become informed and then make the decision that's right for you. You have the answers to your questions available. If you don't, call a selectman or call the finance committee. We're happy to engage with voters to let them know what's at stake, but don't make a decision in ignorance. Make sure that you're informed and make sure you show up and vote.
Anything I haven't asked either of you in regards to the override, any of the numbers that are involved, anything that you feel that's important and pertinent that you can share with the viewers?
I do think the timeline is important. So because this is a regional school district budget hinges on overrides in two towns, there is a wrinkle that I've been asked a lot recently. So that if the budget passes both town meetings and goes to the ballot and it passes in one town and fails in the other, Whitman-Hanson has a rejected budget. So the school district then reconvenes. They have 30 days to reassess both towns a new budget for the same budget. We saw that last year. They voted the same budget back to Hanson. And then the town has 45 days to call a special town meeting. And so those are the maximum time periods. It's very likely that we will try to get all of this done before July 1st, the new fiscal year. So there's a very strong likelihood if an override were to fail in one or both towns, things are going to move very fast, and you'll see more questions coming at you in June.
Same with you. Anything I haven't asked or anything you feel is important?
the ... If we're in that scenario and we come to July 1st without an approved budget, we're in 1/12 budgets, 1/12 of fiscal 25, which means layoffs definitely for the schools. By May 21st or May 30th, they have to inform the teachers whether or not they have a job. Reduction in force notices, which means that people will be receiving unemployment during the summer until they're assured that they have a job, which is their right, and they should be. They have to pay, they have bills to pay. So we want to avoid that. We want decisions made, and we want to know what is our budget before July 1st hits the books.
Yeah, we don't want to be like the state, because we know the past several years the state usually doesn't get a budget put together. They don't have one passed until mid to late July, or even I think it was August 1st last year. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for coming in and being a part of this. Justin, I want to thank you for suggesting that we bring this show back to life and provide information. We want to thank you, the folks who tune into shows like this. Again, we do our best to try to be a conduit to share this information, not to take sides, but if there's ways to ask questions, we try to do it in a neutral manner. If you have questions, I'm pretty sure that most of the folks that we've had on here are easy to access and be able to talk with them to find out more information. Until our next conversation, you've been tuned in to By the Numbers.